Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Jewish Women Entrepreneurs podcast. And today I am really happy to welcome Rebbetzin Bat-Chen Grossman. How are you, Bat-Chen?
Hi. I'm so excited.
I
I'm doing
know,
great.
I I know. I can't believe that the last time we were on a podcast, it wasn't the war. It feels like it was like 100 years ago. But I'm still going to remind everyone who is listening to us that since the war broke out, since October 7th, we have a special series in the podcast that we called a Special Support Israel series, where we interview any initiative that is helping the war or helping small business owners. And we've had amazing stories so far. And today I'm happy to speak with Bat-Chen because there is an aspect that we don't necessarily think about when we think about the war, which is, love or relationships or marriage, right? So before I
Right.
go on, I would like to, introduce you to Bat-Chen. Bat-Chen lives in Kochav Yaakov, which is close to Jerusalem with her husband, and their 7 children, and soon to be another baby. This was also something that we'll talk about because it's amazing in these times. I'm really it's a really good news. And Batchen is a marriage coach for women in business, and she's the CEO of Connected for Real. So, Batchen, before we go into what you do in your business, and this is what we've been doing in the special series so far, we've been asking where people, when it happened, and also if you have anyone close to you, like how is the war impacting you directly, because we're all impacted. But tell us, where were you on October 7th, and what happened to you since then, and how have you been impacted by the war?
So I was listening to your podcast, and one of the women said this, and it was so right and so true. It came at the craziest time because there was, and personally for me also. So my parents left in July to America. They were living upstairs for me for a year. Like they made Aliyah, set up an apartment, lived upstairs in the upstairs floor of our house, which is like a different apartment. And it was such an amazing year. And then they went back to America to do their thing and visit and whatever. And they were going to come back September 5th. And then in August, my father had a stroke in America. And thank God he is, miraculously okay. He's doing PT and OT and all the stuff now, and he's recovering. But there was that, plus other things that came up, plus, so they weren't coming back for the holidays. Then I had all the holidays by myself. I felt very alone and very like, where are my parents? And like I was living without my parents for like 17 years. Nothing bad happened, but when you get used to it, it's so hard. So my kids were missing it. We were feeling it. It was this lack, right? And so on a personal level, we were feeling like, okay, we got to get things back in order. And then, so we had Rosh Hashanah here in my house. My husband has a minyan, prayer. So we had, I think, 7 guests over in this apartment because it was empty. So we ended up having a lot of my husband's students, a couple of couples, and we basically made a Shabbaton for Rosh Hashanah. And it was so amazing. And so one of those guys, David, he went to the war. So I'll give you a little bit about him in a minute. But anyway, Rosh Hashanah was amazing. We had everybody. The next thing, we had Yom Kippur. Again, David came back and was with us for all of Yom Kippur. So my kids really, really, even though like they already knew him and connected to him and love him, and he's part of the family, but there was this like intense time when we were with him a lot. And then Sukkot happened. We had to get together. A lot of my husband's students came. It was really nice. And then boom, the war happened. Now, let's just put aside that my kids found out from the neighbor screaming to them that they have to go inside because there's a war. And they came and told me, which is like the opposite of what you want your kids to know. like it's the opposite of how they're supposed to find out. And so for a long time, I felt really bad as a mother, like, oh my gosh, like there was nothing I could have done to protect them
Well,
from that.
but right, so you didn't hear the news and you didn't hear
Of
the radio
course.
or
Of
anything,
course.
right?
So like, first thing in the morning, my kids are running around trying to get more candy and they're being told, run home. And so I sat down and of course, I, turned on my phone right away, saw that there was something going on. And so I was updated now. At this point, I'm calm. I know that we have to stay inside. And I have something like 15 kids in my house because not only my kids, everybody else's kids were all in my house taking cover. So I took out food and we made a party and we sat down and ate and we just tried to lighten up the mood and we danced and and I was like, what? You're not going to go out to dance? You're not going to go out to get candy? So let's have it here. And so we had a whole party until eventually
But also, you didn't know to what extent. I mean, you knew it was the war, but you didn't know. You just opened so the war, and then didn't have any idea of what was happening, in the South at the same time.
No, and also we did not know anything, but we were hearing booms all the time because we could hear the rockets being stopped by the Iron Dome and we could see it in the air. So
Right.
you have these booms, boom, boom. And the kids are saying, I hear it.
Yeah, but it's interesting because everyone in Israel had a different experience, obviously. And when, at the time, I mean, before October 7th, hearing the boom was the big event of the war. But since then, after what happened in Otef Israel, what they call it now, in the South, it's like the boom are so nothing. It's like, give us booms any day, because what happened was, so, I mean, that's what I keep on always reminding myself, that the rockets and everything that we were used to, quote unquote, is nothing compared to what happened on October 7th. And of course, it's scary when you have 15 kids in the house to have boom over your head. But I think at this time you had no idea what was actually happening in the South.
So I think the first week, the biggest problem was the unknown. People were just walking around not knowing anything. And anything that was coming through the news was something you don't want to share with your kids. So I felt like, there was an image that was going around that was so accurate of, you think you're just a mother, sitting in your house, but what you're doing is holding back all this black noise coming into your house. Like I felt like that. I felt like I was constantly holding away. Don't look at this, don't read this, don't know this, don't move this, don't just stay nice and safe and comfortable in your own little bubble. Like, you just don't want them to know how bad and how terrible, like there's things that even us as adults cannot comprehend. And so they were coming home, of course, as soon as they went to school, they knew everything and it was really bad, but you try as best as you can. Anyway, so David, of course, David went down to the war right away. And one of my daughters said, if something happens to him, I don't think I can deal. I don't know if I can deal because we had this intense time with him and we got so close and we felt like he was one of ours. And suddenly for him to go was really, really difficult. And I have to tell you, it's so crazy. Like, we didn't hear of him. We didn't hear from him. It was really hard. Eventually, I just sent him like pictures from the kids that they made for him. And I was trying to like start conversation. And many days later, he sent me back like, okay, just for all those who want to know, I'm safe. I'm doing fine. And it was like, wow. Everybody just took a, deep breath of fresh air. That's stress that the kids are going through, and it's not even, it's not like their own brother, their own father, but it is for them their person. Like once you have a face to a soldier, once you have a personality to a soldier, that's it. It's too much.
On the one hand, it changes everything, and on the other hand, you keep on thinking, so, and this is not even my son, this is not even my brother, this is not even my husband. Like it's so strong, and yet and you can't even imagine what other people are going through. But let me ask you this.
And I want to tell you something about that. One of my daughters, teenagers, I have a bunch of teenagers, like I have every age, okay? So one of the teenagers said, I feel so bad because I don't have anybody in the immediate family in the war, and all my friends are, really having a hard time, and I feel like I'm some, like a fake, like I'm actually not in the war. And I said to her, like, could you imagine my grandmother? She should live and be well, 86 or 87 at this point, went through the war as a child. Okay. She once came to speak to the girls in her class. And before she came, she's like, I don't know what to say. Like, I don't have such a great story. And it's like, what do you mean you don't have a great story? You have 6 years of history? It's like, yeah, but I wasn't in any concentration camps. I was hidden as a kid and I was moved around from place to place and I had to be in a nunnery and I had to be this and I had to be that. I was like, yes, but your father was away and like all these things, like you still experienced the war, even though it wasn't like someone else's experience, right? And so could you imagine telling someone like, oh, you didn't actually go through the Holocaust, you were just hidden as a kid? Like, no, that's crazy, right? So it's like, same with us. Each one of us is going through it so differently and so extremely unique to us and to our story. But it is so important that we legitimize the fact that we are all in this. We're all experiencing. And your level of stress and anxiety has nothing to do with how intense your story is on the outside.
Exactly. Definitely. I think that this is a really, and I'm also thinking about all the people, the Jewish people that are outside of Israel, that are not necessarily going through it physically or geographically, but they are definitely feeling the pain. I mean, I speak to a lot of friends and family that are, abroad, and of course it's even worse because for them, right? It's even because they feel so connected and they feel so. The fear is there, but they have nothing to claim. They can say like, we're being bombed now. Of course, unfortunately, they have the anti-Semitism, so Jewish people is never bored, right? But it's
I love how you said that. A Jewish person is never bored.
It's never bored, but there's always something to take care of. But I definitely understand what your daughter is saying, and I definitely appreciate what you answered her. And I want to talk about the first week of the war. We actually got together in one of our meetups. We actually right away, a few days, I think the war was on Shabbat. We did it on Wednesday because we were supposed to have a networking meetup, which we changed to a support meetup. And there were, I think, quite a few people. I think, if I remember correctly, 100 people registered. I'm not sure exactly how many people came, but it was really an intense time. It was the first week, and I had also called to any experts to come and help and have different breakout rooms to give emotional support. I remember that you came as an expert, and then at the end you also participated in one of the breakout rooms, and you shared something with me about you being pregnant and going into this room and this, I don't remember, or maybe you do remember who was the expert, but what happened to you a few days after the war when you came to that meetup and had this emotional support session?
So I went in being very happy to support anyone who is being affected in their marriage, right? How do you deal with your marriage? And it doesn't have to be, oh, my husband's away now, and now, our marriage is separated, like I feel far away. It could be, I can't stand my husband's opinions about the war, right? This is like a huge one. My husband's walking around being all opinionated and saying all these negative things and just like spewing, doomsday stuff. And I don't know how to deal.
I want to talk to you about this after the meetup, because I want to go into the thing. Yeah.
Right. This is what I came ready to support. This is what I came ready to support the women there. And thank God, God has his ways. Nobody showed up to my room. And so I was like, you know what? There's nobody here. I'm going straight to someone else. And I remembered, like, I already had this backup plan in my head. Like, if nobody shows up, I'm going to go to Shulamit. And I went to Shulamit, and she was starting a meditation. And so she said, oh, I'm so happy that, you're here, because I also thought you would come to me. Like, we had this weird connection there. Okay. She saw me, I saw her, and like something about having to be in the same room that day. And so she started a meditation by just saying like, okay, deep breaths into your stomach and just fill your stomach up. And as soon as I took a deep breath and I filled my stomach up, I almost started to cry. I felt this sadness take over me. And I said, I have not thought of the fact that I was pregnant for 5 days. Like 5 days of my pregnancy
At
were
the time
just,
you were pregnant, how far? How far were you at the time?
how many weeks are we in the war?
I think it's the 6th week. So let's say 5 weeks ago. How
Yeah. So it's, I was like 16 weeks pregnant.
okay, so you were like,
Yeah,
into it. It's
I
right,
was,
right,
I was,
right, right.
um, I'm sitting there going, there's 5 days in the entire pregnancy where I just did not have a conscious connection with my baby. I didn't think about being pregnant. I don't know. It just completely erased from my consciousness. And it made me feel so sad that I was so disconnected. Like something, gigantic just hit. And I didn't realize how gigantic it was until I realized how disconnected I was, you
Wow.
know?
That's something
And
part of your body that is part of who you are, that you can disconnect from something that huge. And of course, you were not like, you were taking care of your other kids and you were doing a lot of other things. But it's really, I really hear what you're saying, that it's huge that you were like disconnected for this time.
yeah. And I'll tell you another thing. I felt really ashamed and guilty about feeling this way, but I want to make it really normal for all other mothers out there. I was looking forward to them going back to school. Like I really honestly was. I could not wait another day. And so when the war hit, the first thing that went into my head was, oh my gosh, they canceled school tomorrow. Like, I
Wow.
don't know if I can handle it one more day.
Yeah.
And realizing that, okay, it's not about you, honey. Like, get over yourself. There's a war, right? But like, I just felt so uncomfortable with thinking that, like, what is wrong with me? And then I was like, no, nothing's wrong with you. You've been through a lot, it's just been a lot. And we're all ready for this like next step, like I had to-do lists and calendars and things waiting for me. Like I was excited about going back to life. So there was those two things, like just feeling really bad about how I handled it, quote unquote, because I'm not supposed to think about myself or whatever, which is total garbage. Like you are allowed to think about yourself. You're allowed to grieve your own space and time, but also just realizing constantly, like day by day the war kept going. And the second week of the war, I committed to going up to the Temple Mount because I needed to reconnect, because I realized how disconnected I was. And I went up, on Sunday night. I went to mikvah, I prepared, I dunked, and then I went up on Monday morning and I felt myself reconnecting. I really felt so good. I was like, last week was a heck of a year.
Wow.
That was how it felt. It felt like a year went past. We went through so much. There was so many emotions, so many thoughts, so many things, so much going on. And the news is coming in, and the news that's not coming in that you're expecting them to say, but they're not saying. And, all the things. Oh, it's just such a jumble of clutter and noise and stuff that I had to do something to like abrupt that disconnect.
And I really appreciate that you're saying that, because for you it was, the kids going back to school, but I know that a lot of people feel guilty for being happy or celebrating, or not even, not feeling sad all the time, or like there's so much guilt going on because I mean, of course we see all the horrors and we feel like we should be sad all the time, but what can we do? Human beings get used to everything. This is my realization, is that we get used. I mean, you said the first week after the war was a year. I think we're still in that year. I mean, we're second year, it's third year. I don't know how many years, right? But we're not. It's not over. And somehow we are. People started talking about war routine, right? So all of a sudden we're getting into a war routine. So I think that we have to accept that human beings, for the good and the bad, get used to everything, and we have to accept ourselves, our process, and our grief, and the way that we manage things. So I really agree with what you said. So now I want to dive in what you do in your business and how it applies to the war. Because that is really a very interesting approach. A lot of people speak about how do you speak to your kids. A lot of people speak about, how do you manage your own emotional anxiety. Like there is a lot, of course, of support and help for people that need it. But the truth is that I haven't heard so many people speak about that aspect of what does it do to your relationship. You are in a relationship, you're married, and there is a war, and not whether there are kids or not. Like, how can that impact your relationship? And I would like to start. You started talking about it before, but what do you hear? Because I know you have clients and you have people that you support on a regular basis. So what are the risks, or what are the stories that you hear? Of course, without names, we don't need that, but we just want to hear, like, what are the risks of being threatened, or not going through this relationship because of the war, being impacted by the war. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I'm a marriage coach specifically for women in business, and I love that intersection between business and marriage and how they affect each other. And I have a 3-month coaching program where I one-on-one, 3 months, support you through and give you all the tools. It's amazing. And the women who came through there, the most interesting thing happened and also I have, like you said, there's women from other places and all of the people that I support on a, regular. There were a couple of different camps. There's, like I said, the camp of women whose husbands went to the war, and they get a lot of support. Here in Israel, there is a real support system for these women. There's free babysitting, there's free cleaning, the teenagers come and do events. There's a lot, especially in our community, a lot of energy is given to them because, yes, legit, they need it. They need help. Okay. So there's very little that can be said to them. Besides, I heard that, there were women who were addressing what happens when the husband does come. Every 2 weeks he comes for 5 hours. What do you do? Suddenly it disrupts the rhythm that you were talking about, the war rhythm. Like, I finally got used to getting the kids to realize there's no dad around, and now he suddenly showed up, and then he suddenly left, and then so what do we do with this? And so there's a lot going on about just like communicating expectations. Like, if you can have 5 hours of a visit, what do you expect? One thing you need from that time, and just say, this is one thing I need. And he's going to say one thing he needs. And then, that's doable. You could do that in 5 hours, but don't be like, here's a list of things that need to happen in the next 5 hours, right? That's not going to happen. So be really realistic, be very practical, communicate well. Like, I really need some time alone. I really need you to blah, blah. I need, just be really specific. But then there is the other camp of women whose husbands did not go to war. A lot of Olim whose husbands did not go to the army because they made Aliyah later, because they had families, because whatever the reason is, they found themselves very useless. The guys had their own identity crisis. I'm not manly enough. I have no space, no place in this country. What am I supposed to do? Right. And some of them fell into supporting roles. So their wife was the one doing, as a survival mechanism. And so they found themselves doing a lot more at home. So, okay, so I'll take care of the kids, and I'll do the laundry, and I'll do the dishes, and I'll do the food, and I'll support her doing her thing. But then what happened was she then turns around and says, you're useless. You're not doing anything for the war. And he's like, excuse me, here I am trying to support you, what you're doing, right? And so suddenly this like role reversal thing, and his own feelings about his own identity and his own manliness are coming into question. So there's a lot going on there, and that's a really big issue that we had to deal with. And then the last camp, I would say, is the opinions, right? And this can happen even with people who are outside of Israel, where the husbands are listening to certain podcasts, they're listening to certain speakers, they're, consuming different stuff than we are, right? We're like listening to podcasty stuff and we're getting support and all positivity and, supporting each other, blah, blah. The guys are listening to something completely different. They're like, okay, here's what the Torah says about this, and here's halacha about this, and very black and white, very opinionated about like what needs to be happening, who's wrong, who's right, blame, 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 shame, 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 right? There's a lot of noise in the man world of what's happening in the war. And so the men are walking around being all opinionated about what's being done right, what's being done wrong, who's supposed to go, who's not supposed to go, what is and all that noise. And you're like, I cannot stand you. I cannot stand you. Go away from here. Just be quiet. I don't want my kids to hear this. I don't want this energy in my house. I am not interested in all the negativity and the doomsday and the what's going to be. And I don't know what, like, go away. Right. And that is a beginning of an explosion because the husband's like, what do you want from me? I'm just saying the truth. I'm just, pointing out what's actually happening. And, it's like, what are you doing here? Right. And so this conversation can go very, very bad very quickly.
It's like the two worlds that are colliding. And like if in everyday life we can somehow find bridges or, make room for the other, I think that in times of war, like, I think the feminine side, even though when I hear you speak, I'm like, maybe, some women can recognize themselves in what you say, but I think it's more like the feminine and the masculine, whether it's a woman or a man, right? Because it could be that sometimes men are reacting differently, but I think it's funny, not funny in a way, but I think it's like, it becomes a caricature, right? It's like, the feminine is going to try to protect and to wrap and to say, to try to protect from the outside energy, from the negative. And the masculine is going to be, we need to do something. What's going on? Like, like you said, like we need to act. We need to not be, but be more in the doing. And so
Right.
If in general we find a way to, find a balance and the masculine comes and the feminine, they meet each other somewhere. I think in times of war, we just don't have the bandwidth for that. We're just like,
I just want to point out, and I want to point out to you also that this was very strong during Corona, right? Like COVID really brought out the worst in people. It brought out like their true opinions about things, right? Because like you can be okay with like whatever, I don't care anymore, like vaccinate, don't vaccinate, leave me alone, like we're not talking about it. But now that you're forcing me to vaccinate, now that you're putting it in my face, now I'm going to speak up. And suddenly people had very strong opinions about things that they used to hold back because it just wasn't serving them. It wasn't worth the fight. But now the fight was worth it, right? And so we are only now, 3-4 years later, hearing the effects of that. People separating, people divorcing, and like, I just couldn't stand his opinions anymore. I could not stand his,
polarized, right? Everything was polarized. And
polarized, exactly.
Yeah.
And so we are seeing that now. It's a loop that is just coming back to wake us up and say, oh, guys, don't let it snowball. Do not let this snowball. It makes sense that he has opinions, and it makes sense that you have opinions, and you all want the best for everyone. I'm sure even with all his opinions, he still wants the best for his kids. He still wants the best for the environment of the family. He still wants an atmosphere of, peace and love. Like, it's not in his head. These are two different things that do not have anything to do with each other. Just because to you, it makes total sense that it's disturbing the peace, he doesn't see it. So take a deep breath and just communicate, put down a boundary, be really clear. You can have your opinions, but you can have those discussions with your guys. Here, we do not talk about XYZ. Here, we do not have to give all speeches. Here, we do not have to go into all the details. Here, we do not, we don't bring it up. And putting down a boundary makes you very clear. It's a very kind thing to do because then he knows what he's allowed and not allowed to do. It's okay. You didn't tell him, don't have an opinion or your opinion is wrong. It's just like, I understand you have an opinion about this and I respect that. I ask you to take it somewhere where it can be contained. There's all these rabbis and people talking about it. You can go have fun. You can go on your podcast. You can do your thing. You can talk about it from here to tomorrow, but just keep it out of the house. Just keep my kids protected. Having the ability to put down that boundary is going to save you from so much pain, because
So
you've just
I just want to really make sure, because I think it's a question that we have when we feel like we're mothers, but we're also intelligent women, right? And so we also have our opinion. And so are you saying that for the sake of clear boundaries, and the goal of protecting, like the house from negative energy or negative tension, it's a better not to go into the content and to try to explain, like to say whatever opinion you have, I'm not even going into it, like not even to go inside and have this discussion in on the content, but just say whatever it is, keep it with your friends. Like, is that what you're saying, or are you
I
saying yes, have
personally,
a discussion?
it's important to talk about a lot of things. I do believe that having, a respectful communication and like sitting down and, face to face, eye to eye, without all the other listeners around, right? Like when you have kids, it's really important to not do this in front of your kids. But yes, it is important to talk about a lot of things. But when things are hot like this, and when there's new news every 2 seconds, right? Like somebody was saying, there's a world record. Somebody didn't listen to the news for 20 whole minutes. Like that's a joke, right? Because we're constantly consuming, we're constantly hearing updates, we're constantly finding out, oh, now it's getting worse. Now it's getting this. Now it's here. Now it's there. Now there's this. Now there's that. Oh, did you expect that? Obviously, blah, blah, right? Like we have all this automatic stuff that comes up. We're in the middle of the fire. It's not the time to talk about how the fire started or who did the fire, who's to blame about the fire. Like we are in fire. Let's do whatever we can to protect and to, survive and to save and to do all the things we need to do. Like really focus. The goal right now is to keep ourselves safe. And then when everything calms down, we can sit down and talk about it, be like, listen, it was so hard for me to hear you say all this doomsday stuff because I'm such a positive person. And I want to believe that things are going to be good. And I want to see that we're in the right track and we're moving towards, the right goals and blah, blah. Right. And I want someone to come in the house and say constantly, like, God is here and God is watching and don't worry. And instead you're walking in and saying, oh, those people are not watching. Oh, those people are not doing their job. Right. It's like, that's the opposite. But I can have that discussion from a very calm place when I'm not in the middle of the fire. Right. So you have to choose the right time to be having this conversation. And right now, I'm just really not sure that you're going to be able to stay that calm and
Right.
be able to contain his answers. Right. Because
Right.
his answers are, but this is the truth, but these are the
This is the
facts.
way,
But
this is the
obviously,
way,
right.
the way he sees it. So I hear what you're saying. You're saying making a choice to talk about boundaries and protecting yourself and your family doesn't mean you don't have opinions. It doesn't mean that you agree with what he's saying. It means that you're postponing the discussion, and that right now you're tending to the most urgent, which is really keeping a safe energy, positive in your home, which traditionally maybe some men are also connected to, but I think the feminine energy at least is really connected to that. And I think it's important for women also not to feel that if they're making this choice, it's because they don't have something to say, because they
Oh, it's the opposite. It's the
it
opposite.
has you say
Most
on the news and on the what's happening. But I think what you're saying is, let's make a choice. Like, what is more important? First, survival, then safe, then of course physically, and then mentally, and then emotionally, and then like protecting the energy of the house. And just like at this time, it's not let's not open the whole conversation, but at least boundaries of this is what I can accept, this is what I cannot accept, and we'll discuss it later. I think that that's something that is important for women, not to feel that they're giving up. You're not giving up, and you're not saying that he's right, or that the masculine is right, but you are more like manage your priorities more. That's what you're
Right.
saying.
One of the most important things is when you forgive someone or when you put a boundary down or when you say, please stop that. you're not excusing it. You're not making it okay. You're not making it as if it didn't happen. You're just putting down a boundary,
Right.
and that has nothing to do with your level of intelligence or who is right. It has to do with how mature you are to be able to say, like, this is where it stops,
Right.
and
That,
that takes,
go ahead.
yeah, I'm saying that takes a certain place, like it, we're very intelligent, as you know, women are very, very intelligent. We can understand that, even though I'm right, I really don't need to be
Right.
right now. I just need to make sure we're safe. Like,
Right.
it's okay. I don't have to prove to the world that I'm right. And you can let that go for just a minute so
Yes.
that you
So
take
that
care of what needs to be taken
you
care of.
reach your goal. And I think that there is also something to say about the fact that you might not get all the emotional support that you would want to get from your husband at this time, or your partner, or what, if we talk about feminine, masculine, I think the feminine is gonna have to also wait to get that emotional support, because the partner might not be ready to give it at this time. And so I think, like, even if he goes and gets his opinion somewhere else, then this is the time also for us women to come together and to be more connected with the feminine energy that we need, and not expect to have some kind of support somewhere, somewhere that we're not going to get it. I think that that's also important. No.
Yeah, so this is the other thing that is happening and is very, very strong, is that intimate connection is being disrupted because you just you're just too worried, you're too anxious, there's too much going on, there's so much noise. Like, how do you turn off the noise? How do you disconnect and go into, like you said, how do I have a good day when everybody else is having a bad day?
Right.
How do I give myself permission to even go in there, like, go and close the door and be like, "Oh, okay, now I'm all, feeling nice and refreshed." No, it's very difficult to just switch over. And so this is somewhere where it's really, really important. You brought up getting support. And actually, even though he has his opinions, and even though you're putting down boundaries, and even though all these things, you still have the opportunity to lean on him for sharing. Here's how I'm feeling. Here's what's going on in my life. I'm having a really hard time turning off right now and just being present, you
Right.
know? And if you can start a conversation like that, then very quickly you will find yourself heard, and you'll find yourself held, and you'll find yourself supported, because he does want to support you. He loves you and he wants this to be, good for you, but he
Right.
doesn't know how. So you have to get really clear about, like, what do I need and what do I
Right.
want, And that's where I found myself creating the intimacy masterclass,
So that's what I
specific.
was. We're getting to the end of the podcast. So I wanted to bring that also, because I know that you have an amazing masterclass coming up, and I think that talking about it now is really about the intimacy. So tell us more about the masterclass. Tell us more why there's this a need to speak about intimacy now. Between couples.
So, when things are okay and things are fine, then your marriage could be okay and fine and just continue surviving, right? A lot of people are walking around with an okay marriage, and it's like, it's functioning, it's working, whatever, kids are getting from here to there. Like, everything is sort of working out, but there isn't a very strong connection. But that's okay. It seems okay, at least from the outside. But then when things start getting all turbulent and things intensify, you suddenly realize how little everything is okay. Like, no, the things are not okay, And then the place where you should be able to lean on, and the place where you should feel support, suddenly feels like the worst place to go for support.
Right.
And this is the most dangerous place to be in, because then there's shame. Oh, I messed up. It's, I didn't do it right. Something is wrong with me. There's all this, like, awkwardness about, like, yeah, I'm supposed to like focused on this part of my life now in the middle of a war? Like, what does this even mean? But it's not about the romance and all the, lovey-dovey stuff. It's really about creating that rock solid foundation that you can then have a marriage on top of, right? So like if you have a rock solid marriage, like you're able to authentically communicate and you're able to connect and you have this deep, intimate bond, then you could fight about food or you could fight about the kids, you could fight about whatever. Anything that comes up is like, whatever, and it doesn't really move you as much. But if it's the other way around, if things look good on the outside, but then the inside is like really not sustaining, very quickly things are going to start falling apart and we're going to wonder like what happened. It looked so good on the outside, right? So this is the time. This is the time to create that rock solid marriage. This is the time to really focus on getting the support, getting the love, getting the connection that you need and that you deserve. And I think the biggest thing that we're going to address that I don't think anybody else addresses when talking about intimacy is bringing God into it. Like, what does God have to do with intimacy? Like, usually God is very spiritual, intimacy is very physical, like they don't go together, right? And we have this belief that it just not very appropriate, but really in reality, it's super appropriate. It's like the place where you get to a higher level of consciousness, where you can really connect, where you can really get downloads, where you can together create something that you would not be able to create alone. And that's something that we're addressing that I don't think anybody else is addressing in any of the other intimacy things. So I'm excited about that.
So where's the masterclass happening? Tell us more.
Okay, so the masterclass is $97, is 90 minutes of live, everything. You get a meditation, you get all the different discussions. We walk through how to create the rock solid marriage and exercises and practical. We get really deep. It's happening December 17th live.
Okay.
Yeah. And
So
anybody who signs, we have another week and a little.
Yep.
I think maybe 2 weeks. And anybody who signs up gets instant access to the previous intimacy masterclass that has all the basics. So how to rekindle, how to bring back the fireworks, all the things that are regular, not during hard times. The basics are already there for you. So you get two for the price of one.
Nice.
And yes, and I always give a one-on-one follow-up because I think it's such a personal topic that it's something very difficult to send in a question or to just like, let me just ask in the chat. It doesn't work like that. Usually it's something that you want to take some time to talk about. So you also get a free one-on-one with me for 15 minutes.
Nice. That's really nice. Well, I'm sure that you're going to put the link of the registration below the interview. And I think that a lot of people...
I could also say it right now. It's connectedforreal.com/intimacy.
Perfect. That's easy to remember. Amazing. So you have the link. And I think that even though it's not really the first thing that you would think in a war, like, I need to take care of my marriage. But I think that you're right, this is the foundation. And if, we don't have good relationships, we're not going to feel good about ourselves. And then we can't help our, kids and the people around us and our clients. And I think that it makes a lot of sense that, we need to go deeper. Like, we can't afford to just, let it slide or just make it work, right? We have to go, this is the time where we have to go deeper. Wow, yes. Thank you so much, Bat-Chen. This was really interesting to look at war from that perspective. I think that it's important that we take care of that and we take care of ourselves because it's a holistic approach, right? We're not separate. We're not like business and women and mothers and wives. Like we're the same person. And if something doesn't work, then we can't really function. So I think that this is very important.
100%. It's all about wholeness. We are a whole person and we contain all the parts of ourselves. So, one of the things I love about your get-togethers on Wednesday is that you have every angle There's always every angle comes up, and you can be your whole self showing up and say whatever is coming up for you. And it's not like, oh, that's a topic we don't talk about here. Like, no, it's not like that. It's more like, this is part of you, and I'm happy you brought this up. And we always find ways to just really bring it all together. And I love that about you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, we have our next meetup on Wednesday. Now we've moved to bi-weekly because, the weekly ones was really hard for everyone to come every week. Yeah, we have you coming this Wednesday as a speaker. Wow, good that you reminded me that you're going to speak about also intimacy. So I'll put the link, of course. We'll promote for people to come so that you can network with women entrepreneurs from all around the world, and also get a sneak peek into the how to really build your foundation in your marriage and how to create amazing intimacy. So yes, looking forward to Wednesday. Thank you for the reminder. Thank you so much. Okay. And we will see you for the next episode with another story or initiative in the Special Support Israel series, because we're continuing to really want to give exposure to people that are doing their part. Everyone is doing their part to allow us to go through this time somehow. That's what we have to do. So thank you so much, Bat-Chen, and I'll see you on Wednesday.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.